Well, good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody enjoying MicroStrategy World? Yay! That's a very hungover greeting. So my name's Shawn Royal, and I'm going to be taking you through our journey from using managed tasks and the SDK to using the REST APIs. A little bit about myself. I'm a staff engineer with SPS Commerce. I started as a software engineer in 1999. I've been working with SPS Commerce since 2010. In my career, I've worn a lot of hats, architected a lot of systems, especially large data systems. My team, the analytics team, we develop and maintain an analytics offering that uses MicroStrategy, and we support the infrastructure for it. And you can find me on LinkedIn. As you can see by the picture, I wear two hats in life too. I got the dichotomy. I'm a geek by day, I'm a rock star by night. I've been touring as a professional drummer for about, 30 years. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about SPS Commerce's offering as an analytics product. We're going to talk about the architecture of the infrastructure, the services that we'll be addressing, especially the ones that we migrated, the services, how they used to work using the SDK and the managed tasks, and the pitfalls of that approach, how the services are working now using the REST APIs, and the gains of the REST APIs over the SDK. Okay, so let's talk about our offering. First of all, SPS Commerce, we are the global leader in supply chain fulfillment. Pretty much everything that you order through Amazon will come through us. We have the largest network of suppliers and retailers in the world. We have an analytics SaaS offering that uses MicroStrategy, as we are an OEM partner. So we skin MicroStrategy and sell it to our clients. The offerings that we're going to be talking about today is performance analytics, and that's for the suppliers. And then we have collaboration analytics, that's for the retailers. We provide all the reporting for them, and suppliers can view their performance with their cooperating retailers, just like retailers can view all of their suppliers that they use in their retail stores to see how that's going. SPS Commerce, we have a retail intelligence team. They built out-of-the-box dossiers. We offer 21, but we also support the ad hoc reporting. It's pretty key with subscriptions, especially for the suppliers, because we kind of sell the model where you log in once, you figure out what reports you care about, get a subscription, and then you don't have to go back to the application because we'll just deliver your data to you when the retailer data arrives. On the flip side of it too, we allow the clients to define all of their users. What data can they see, and build account teams, et cetera, and control all that. So let's look at the architecture. Don't get intimidated by this document. So up in the top right corner are the services that support the PACA infrastructure. On the top left, you have the entry points, which is the administration portal or the customer portal, and that's where the entry point that'll come into the MicroStrategy ecosystem. And our backends, we use Microsoft SQL Server, but a lot of Snowflake. So our entire retailer solution uses Snowflake backends. And our suppliers, all new ramped suppliers, will be using Snowflake. And then we have an in-flight initiative right now to migrate people into the Snowflake environment. Now let's talk about the MicroStrategy cluster. So this is what our architecture for a single cluster for our MicroStrategy environment looks like. So we have a load balancer, 2 web servers, and then another load balancer for the 2 iServers that both talk to the metadata. Everything talks to the statistics database and the platform analytics database. And then we also have 3 separate servers, 1 for shared storage, 1 for platform analytics, and 1 for the dev tools. So that's got your object manager, your developer, your workstation, all of that there. Now, how many projects do we have? Okay, so we are running 4 clusters in dev. In pre-prod, we have 5 clusters. Production, we have 8. Now, one of the main things that we did is we automated our infrastructure. So we can stand up a cluster at the press of a button, and as well, any production cluster, any cluster, we can knock over servers at will. Oh, if the web server isn't responding, knock it over, a new one stands up, knows exactly what's going on in the cluster, fully configured. How many clients are we serving? We have 1,400 plus clients, and there's a project per client. So there's a lot of projects out there. And we're ramping probably up to 2 retailers and suppliers a week. So we're growing really, really fast. And the funny thing is that number was probably 600 3 years ago. and we're just continuously ramping. So inside this ecosystem, what are we going to be talking about? What services are we talking about? We're going to talk about the Performance Analytics Subscription Service. This is that handles the supplier account subscriptions. It tracks when the retailer data lands, automatically fires subscriptions that are linked to the retailer. And then we're going to talk about our user sync service. This is when users are created by the clients in the customer portal. We have a service that syncs that user into the MicroStrategy environment, building out the user, their user groups, all of the security roles, ACLs, et cetera. All right, so how does the PA subscription service, how did it used to work? Okay, so we have a Java plugin that's sitting on the web server, and a subscription gets created by the user. When that subscription is created, the plugin, it used to, using the SDK, would create an event and a schedule using a very specific naming convention, and then and build that in MicroStrategy. And if it was a single retailer subscription, it just exits out. If it was a multi-retailer solution, so what it has to do is it grabs the supplier identifier, all the retailers that are associated with the subscription, and the event name, and it would log that to a separate database. And a managed task would trigger the event, and any schedules that are attached to that event would fire the subscriptions. And then this ran on a scheduled ECS task that ran every 20 minutes. So it would wake up, it would scrape all of the retailer databases. Any new data? No? Oh, do nothing? Oh, there is new data? Fire those events and schedules. And the task execution through the SDK, it was fire and forget. So it would just wake up, fire the event, and off it goes. Now, what are the pitfalls of that? Having to create so many objects for a subscription just bloats the metadata. Having the workflow rely on managed tasks was a little bit shady for us. With the managed tasks, it was harder to debug changes in the code because the code lives on the web server, so you can't run it locally. So you have to log on to the web server, you have to hook up the debugger with IntelliJ and jump through hoops. We were also tied to this horrible naming convention. So let me just clarify. When the SPS Commerce consumes companies, right? Not just scrap. They find the top world-class companies, and they buy them out, and they join the SPS Commerce. So the company, Edifice, out of New Jersey, who built this analytics offering, did a really good job. But it was a bunch of people who knew absolutely everything about MicroStrategy and very little about software engineering. Now, my team, we came from a company called Toolbox. They bring us onto this, and we're a bunch of people that know everything about software engineering and very little about, MicroStrategy. So what did we do? We start unwinding and looking at the architecture and straightening stuff out. So this played a key role in both of the services that we're going to talk about. So going back to the pitfalls, for me working with Java, I find that the IDE isn't as intuitive as something like Visual Studio, so that's just a personal thing for me. With the firing of events being fire and forget, it was very hard to track if a subscription failed, because we're firing the event that fires the schedule that fires the subscriptions. We knew we successfully triggered the event, but we don't know really what happened to the subscriptions. It's just lost in the ether. And also working with the SDK, it's great, and we write some great code, but MicroStrategy does not support our code. Right? So there was no real support there. We're like, oh, we're having problems with that. They're like, not our code. I'm like, okay. So how does it work now? The best thing about this is we rewrote the entire architecture. We still have a Java plugin that is managing the subscriptions, but what it does is it creates the subscription to MicroStrategy, and then it writes all of the information to a centralized database that we developed. Every 20 minutes, we have an AWS Lambda that will fire. It calls out to our subscription API. It uses the business logic to determine in our centralized database, is there any subscriptions that need to fire? If so, it fires the subscriptions. So it fires the subscriptions by our subscription API calling into the REST APIs. And the great thing about that is we get instant feedback if that subscription fired. Now, we didn't initially, when we were re-architecting this, we didn't initially think REST API. But using the SDK, you cannot fire a subscription directly. You have to build the event that has the schedule, that has the subscription. Now here, we have an endpoint that we pass in the project GUID ID, the subscription GUID ID, and off it goes. And we know if that fired. So what's great with our architecture is when we fire a subscription, we get the immediate feedback. And if it failed, for whatever reason, we mark it in our database. So the next time the Lambda wakes up, it says, give me all the subscriptions. That includes anyone that have fired recently that failed. So we can refire failed subscriptions. The major upsides of this approach, okay? We're now using supported code for MicroStrategy. So if we have a problem, we reach out to the support team who have been absolutely amazing for us, and they help us. We're no longer tied to Java. By leveraging the REST APIs, we can use any language that we want, and because we're just reaching out to endpoints, right? The direct feedback, if a subscription fired successfully, this doesn't guarantee that the subscription processed successfully, but we know that the subscription did fire. So let's talk about what that looks like. So we'll have a client that'll come to us and say, hey, I didn't get my subscription. Oh, okay. We look in our database. Did the subscription fire successfully? Oh, it did. So then we go, hey, let's go check SendGrid. Do we see that the email got sent? Oh, the email got sent. Hey, you better check your clutter. Oh, the email didn't get sent. Then we go into the statistics database and start going through there. Oh, there it is. There's the subscription executed. Check the report. Oh, the report failed. Oh, a Java heap error. Oh, they probably need to expand the Java heap for that particular project. Hey, MicroStrategy admins on our team, can you fix that? No problem. We refire the subscription. Hey, there's your subs now. We can easily debug and test the architecture because we're only executing endpoints. We can test any endpoint to any subscription just by firing the endpoint. And I'll say it again because you're going to hear about 5 times. The support for MicroStrategy has been stellar for using this. So this is what the subscription service architecture looks like. We have the subscription database. There's the Lambda. Wakes up, calls the subscriptions API. We just call the REST API. It was our go to the subscriptions DB. Hey, what needs to fire? Okay, here's all the subs that need to fire. Cursor through them, fire, fire, fire. Report back to the subscriptions database, success or failure, and then we write everything to CloudWatch. That then gets consumed to Sumo, so we can track down everything. So let's talk about the user sync service, how it used to work. Okay, we have another Java plugin living on the web server, and when a sync happened, an orchestrator would pull the sync messages off a locally managed queue and execute the managed task. It would call a single managed task, sync user. And the managed task would execute the steps to create the user and all subsequent objects. The code was written by SPS engineers. So you don't know what you don't know, right? So we built this thing to do what, to build the users, but did we do it the most efficient way? Was that the right? Did we miss any steps? So we only had the understanding of what needs to be done. And the syncs also fire and forget. So what are the pitfalls of that? Having to rely on the managed tasks. With the managed tasks, it was again, just like the subscription, hard to debug because you had to go back on the web server to debug it. We were bound to the code we wrote, limited to our working knowledge of what needed to be done. Support couldn't help us with the custom plugin code. Our architecture, I'll be honest, it wasn't great. We could have had better logging, better messaging, better visibility, but again, when it was written, people didn't understand the importance of that. And that the loss of the visibility and the success or failure within the job queue, also really didn't help. And all you would get back is a message that, hey, I failed, but you don't know what process in the user sync process that it failed on. Or the other problem, if you did a massive user sync, you have API timeouts, right? So it's firing, but the API front end will time out and it'll report a failure, but behind the scenes, it's still working. So the user sync is actually succeeding, but now you're getting false negatives. So what did we do? We rewrote the architecture. Instead of using managed tasks and the plugin to do the work, we orchestrate everything in our own API and use the REST APIs to do absolutely everything. Our orchestrator pulls the messages off the message queue and executes the REST API endpoints. Create, update, delete users, create user groups, create security filters, create ACLs. We get immediate feedback if any step fails, and we know exactly where it failed and why it failed, and we can have accurate estimations as to when syncing for a user is going to be complete. So if somebody's throwing 350 users into a sync because they're syncing the entire account, we know how long that's going to take and can give feedback on that. Major upsides of the approach, we're using supported code from MicroStrategy. Direct feedback if a stage in the user sync fails. Easy debugging, because we're running it locally. We run our API code locally, no problem. And we're only reaching out to the APIs. Amazing support, again, from the support team. The workflows, holy moly. If you haven't seen the Postman workflows for the REST APIs, we're gonna look at them afterwards. They are absolutely amazing. Anything you need to do, they just tell you, here's the steps to do. Here's the API calls you need to do. And now we have more accurate results and definitive reasons for failures. So, and let's just quickly look at this is the user sync workflow that we use. We have the proprietary client putting stuff into the message queue. The orchestrator pulls it off, uses their user sync API. It calls into the REST API, log out to the cloud service. Now, what are the direct gains and advantages of moving to the REST APIs? The ability to run the API locally, call in the REST APIs to handle all the heavy lifting, makes development a lot easier, you know. Using the REST APIs, we can easily test any point of our process and get immediate feedback from the endpoint. The workflows from Postman that provided MSTR have proven absolutely invaluable. We can get direct support for MicroStrategy as we're using their managed code and not our custom code via the SDK. Endpoints are being added with every release of MicroStrategy so we can expand our functionality if needed. With the direct feedback for the API calls, it's made the visibility much clearer for some of our most complex services. If something fails, we know exactly why. Reliability and visibility are absolute keys to success. Utilizing the REST API suite allows us to have both of those at the highest level. And using the REST APIs, we're not bound to using Java. We can use any language that we want because we're just calling into that suite of APIs. An interesting point of note, so our team, the engineering team, we support the services that there's 29 services that we support. So support tickets will come to us if there's an issue. Subscriptions and user syncs were our #1 issue. There was always 10 or 15 issues landing a week, you know, that the team is tackling on our ad hoc board. Since putting the new user sync process in, we haven't seen a single ticket because it's now reliable. And for the ones that we've had for the subscriptions, we get to the definitive answers. We know, we'll say exactly, oh, this didn't fire because of this, or check your junk email. We know exactly, we can get to the bottom of absolutely everything. So we have a little graph here. Abraham helped me with this one. So it's just, you know, going against the tasks approach versus the REST API approach. So you have ease of development, 50%. I guess that's how big your brain is. The REST API, 90%. I mean, it's so much easier to develop with the APIs. Documentation and support, 40%, generous. We all know, I mean, when you're going to look for documentation, you're basically reading KBEs that other people have put in the community, right? But the REST API approach, I mean, the documentation for the REST APIs it's absolutely amazing. Availability of new endpoints, none for the SDK. Every release, you're getting new endpoints. Reliability and visibility, I was generous with 50% with the SDK, but let's not lie. It could be 100% if you put proper logging when you're writing your code, right? But REST API approach, 90%. But the average response time, 2 seconds plus when you're using the managed tasks in the SDK, 3 milliseconds. Instant, you know, because I don't know what they did. They hit the turbo button behind the scenes, but it runs a lot faster now. Questions? I know I just threw a whole lot of information at you.
How many subscriptions do you have on average?
So, that's a good question. Right now in our database, we have 39,000 subscriptions that fire weekly. Oh. And so we have a kind of I'd like to say a top load. All of the retailer data will start landing on Sundays. And so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday are heavy load days because we're getting petabytes of data, right? Because we get retailer data for suppliers that aren't necessarily our clients. They're just cooperators, so they send us their data because the suppliers have an agreement with them. So we have some of our larger clients, I can't drop client names, but one of them, a sportswear manufacturer, they have 197 retailer connections. And so we're getting 197 points of data from retailers just for that one supplier. And the subscriptions fire. So the methodology for subscriptions, especially for suppliers, it's a little bit more difficult. Retailers, retailer data comes in, here's your subscriptions. A supplier can have so many retailers, and they have a subscriptions that's for 4 retailers. So we have to track when all of the data has come in for the 4 retailers for that subscription, and the date that it arrived is newer than the last time it was fired. That's when we fired the subscription. And so that's all tracked in our centralized database. And it's also really cool because we now have one source of truth of when we receive retailer data. And it just really helps with visibility. The gentleman in the 3rd row.
Yeah, I'm not real familiar with the different tools. When you talk about the SDK, is that different than the Mysterio libraries?
Abraham.
No problem, guys. I'm here to help with the MicroStrategy related questions. And for those who don't know me, my name is Abraham Jain. I lead as a VP of Expert Services for MicroStrategy. I've been in MicroStrategy 17 years. So just say I know my way around. So the question was the SDKs, right? So these guys have been with us for a while, 10 years?
Yes.
In MicroStrategy. Right, so when they originally built their application, REST APIs were not available. Right, so the original implementation was done with an API that was available at that time. That API is called the Task API. Okay? Task API was, let's say, an attempt for us to build endpoints that allow you to create workflows, right? Like creating a subscription, like executing a subscription. Right? All those things were not really available, so we created those. Think of them as points of based in Java architecture, right? But you could write your own Java code using the MicroStrategy Java SDK, right? Therefore, the Java was always in the middle. It was running in the web server, then connecting to the iServer. The beauty about the REST API is that it's so quick because it goes right away to the iServer, right? It didn't have to go through the REST API. And their journey is basically transforming and modernizing a solution that was working for a while, and had certain pitfalls, right? And using now the newer REST APIs, which MicroStrategy has invested greatly in creating, all the support, all the capabilities, all the framework around it, so that it's fast and allows more integration, allows better support for upgrades, right? I think now that's one thing that maybe you didn't mention, right? Like every upgrade, plugins are probably doomed to fail, right? Because maybe the Java was updated, or maybe something else occurred, or your libraries that you're bringing in that are used externally are not available any longer. Like there's so much that can fail, right?
So follow up there. So Mysterio then, it's a Python library. It's actually using the REST APIs.
That's right. In fact, Mysterio, think of it as a wrapper. Right? We just wrap a bunch of code that you might need to write to be able to call these REST APIs to make it simpler. Now you can call get user, but in reality, get user is 5 API calls to the REST API, and you're encapsulating to one call inside of MSTR IO. Problem?
How does the maintenance work? Like you said, you have 39,000 subscriptions. How do you maintain it? Like what's the cleanup process?
Again, through the subscription plugin, we intercept anything that for a subscription. So if the user goes and unsubscribes from a subscription, we do a soft delete in our own database. So we allow the users to manage all the subscriptions except for the cubes. As part of the ramping process, when they have cubes, our implementation team sets up everything that needs to happen for the cubes, and they flag them, and our process scrapes the metadata to pull out any new cubes that have been created in the last hour to add to our subscriptions library.
Do you think the users are really going to go and unsubscribe?
They do all the time. Yeah, because sometimes, we get a lot of requests to shift because, a user will leave and their account team will just say, hey, this person left. Can you please move all subscriptions and reports of that person owned to this other person? And our MicroStrategy admins just kind of move stuff around for them.
I think one of the things you mentioned was that the number of objects that you needed in the metadata for the solution was reduced because now you don't need the events.
No, when we create a subscription, we attach it to, because a subscription, has to be attached to a schedule. So we have a default schedule, which is when retailers arrive. And we had just attached to that, that's attached to the dummy event. And we don't even care about that subscription of the event because we control in our database, we know all the different schedules that are there, and it's all baked into our business knowledge or our business logic in our API.
So this subscription database is customized and how
yeah, me and my team wrote it.
Okay, and what is the process and the code you use to save?
I'm sorry?
What is the process and the code you use to save the database in the subscriptions?
Oh, so we write all of the information that we need from the subscription, what retailers were selected, who the supplier is, and we actually harvest the project ID, the subscription ID, the name of the subscription, the report that it's executing, and that goes into the database. Also tracking, like I said, the retailers. And then when it wakes up, we know which retailers data has arrived for that supplier, and we just say, hey, is there any subscriptions for this retailer that has, for this supplier, for these retailers' data that has arrived that was fired later than the newest data? And so then it fires the data. Oh.
I have two questions. So can you comment a little bit about how the skills in your team evolved with both the architectures? And then second question is, can you comment, I'm assuming that you're using like your own version of MicroStrategy when you kind of OEM it, or are you using the cloud version? So
no, we're an on-premise installation, but we're on 11.3.10, about to go to 11.3.11 very, very shortly. It's actually in this quarter. And as far as the skill set on the team, I'm going to brag. We have the smartest people in the world working for us. Our team is awesome. And the cool thing about our team, the Pocket team, we mob program. So it's not like we do sprint planning because we're agile. We do sprint planning and we say, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. We divide our team up into 2 mini mobs. And we have one person that drives and everybody has input. And we go, oh, that's okay, so we're going to write this function. And we start building off there. The leveraging that we get off of engineering like that is you have many different eyes on the code because everyone has their certain way of doing it. Now you have multiple minds that are writing the best possible code. Code reviews now become easy because you've had 4 people looking at it. And it builds the camaraderie. And it helps, especially when you have the senior people, like myself and Goldie, our manager, and our seniors, working with the more juniors. It's just solid knowledge transfer. And it also breaks down silos. It's not like any one piece of functionality in the service, it lives in one person's head. Everybody, it's spread throughout. And we share it across the mobs. So
That's great.
in our company, we have struggled to motivate, I think, junior people to take on the SDK work. So I'm assuming that you may have had a similar challenge, right, with the legacy architecture, that only maybe a few senior people knew the details of how the SDK worked.
So check this out. I was going to save this little Easter egg. Let's look at Postman. So this is why we interrogated the existing code that we had to try to figure out what we have to do for the user sync process. But then we went, well, we don't have to do that because these are the workflows. Like, look at just under here, prepare a user group. So these are all the steps that you have to do to create a user group. They tell you. And it's just exactly what Abraham was talking about, behind Mysterio. These are the steps that are going to go, hey, I need to create a new security filter. That's what you got to do. Here's all of the steps to call an order. And the great thing is, when you execute one of these APIs, the return value is the input for the next call. And it's secular like that. It's absolutely phenomenal. So that's where it really got easy for our team because, like I said, you don't know what you don't know. So MicroStrategy gracefully just said, here you go, this is what you got to do. So
I think that's a journey, even in my team, was exactly the same, right? The new guys that we hire, they come motivated to do things with new technology, right? When you talk to them about Java, then the motivation starts to lack, right? But when you talk to them about REST APIs, you talk to them about React, when you talk to them about frameworks like Spring, like things that are, everybody's using, then they become really motivated to work on that. And this has really opened a lot of opportunities to build additional integrations with other softwares that are doing the same thing, making REST APIs available, right? It opens a huge door of opportunity for all your developers to become motivated to do more work, right?
Oh.
Hi, two questions. I see you mentioned something about security filter up there. Is that authentic? I mean, does that automatically apply when user authenticates a sign-on, or is that something that's actually just being run later on?
It's the security filters that I'm talking about there that we create are restricting what data that the user can see.
Right.
So yeah.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, so for us, I mean, we're trying to embed MicroStrategy into our customer portal. And for the customers, we're trying to, apply security filter onto the customer's login.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if there is any REST API function that we could.
Yes, 100%. So when you build the security filters, you can then, in the REST APIs, you can apply those security filters directly to the user.
Okay. Another thing, I haven't seen a REST API function for the exports with the subscriptions. I've seen a web SDK for it, but for the exports function, do you guys have the same options that you have on dashboards for as of now, like the PDF, Excel, and all that?
Yeah, because we don't control any of that. When a user creates a subscription, they create the subscription, and all that information for the exporting, that's all proprietary to MicroStrategy. That still lives in the metadata. When we fire the subscription, that's kind of the end of our tooling. That's the great thing about it. We fire the endpoint, and then we let MicroStrategy do all the heavy lifting. Oh, this subscription is running this report. Okay, all the cubes are prepared. Yeah, okay, we can run this report. Oh, they want it exported to Excel. Okay, and it exports through the export service.
Okay, so there's no restriction to what format they could export to.
When you create a subscription, right, in the REST API, in the subscription properties, you can define what is the output. And all of the outputs that are supported, as long as you have them enabled in your environment and the user is able to use them, like they have the privileges to use them, you can specify any of the supported outputs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll do that.
Is that it?
My little thank you page. Find me on LinkedIn and chat.